Have a popping or clicking shoulder, been diagnosed with shoulder impingement, having shoulder pain? This video is for you. What's up, everybody? I'm Dr. Matt Maggio, creator of the Peak Method and founder of the Soft Tissue Revolution, and we're on a mission to make chronic injuries obsolete by helping people that are injured and in pain get access to quality hands-on soft tissue treatment and get properly educated and informed on their injuries so they don't have to go down the bad path of pain pills, injections, and surgeries, which only make things worse. We're back at it for one of my favorite segments, Ask the Doc. All right, we got a great question from Anna on IG. I had to borrow my intern's phone. He's laughing behind there because I don't have IG on my phone. I try to not use it as much. But she said, so I think that's Joe Rogan, right? In a sauna. Interesting. All right. I have this constant clicking and popping in my shoulder. Most of the time it doesn't hurt, but the other day I reached to get something out of the cupboard and it felt like I was getting stabbed. I've had issues with this shoulder since I was in high school, and an orthopedic doctor diagnosed me with shoulder impingement and gave me 2 injections. I have a really high pain tolerance, but that feeling I had was pretty awful, and I don't want to experience that ever again. Any insights and advice would be greatly appreciated. Sounds like a good one for the whiteboard. So thank you so much, Anna, for that question. I kind of want to break this down just a little bit more. First off is just that idea, and I'm holding a shoulder here. Let me make sure I get this right. Yeah, this is the back of it. Sometimes I get them backwards, but shoulder is a really complex joint, especially in the human body. It has to move all over the place. So a lot of times what I always say for the shoulder is the shoulder is built for mobility and the hip is built for stability. So there tends to be a lot more shoulder injuries than there does hips, especially in people that are athletes and using their shoulder a lot. But this idea of shoulder impingement, it's like, oh, it's getting stuck in there. That's a very basic, I'm going to use a fancy word for our intern today, like rudimentary description of what's going on. Basically, it's like, oh, something's getting stuck. I always say whenever you have a problem, you have to have a tissue-specific diagnosis, and shoulder impingement really doesn't tell us jack shit except for it's getting stuck. So why is that shoulder getting stuck? So when we look at the shoulder joint in through here, it is very complex, but very simple as well. So on the front part here, this is the front part where your collarbone is. So we'll give it like a in through here. And basically there's only one muscle that lives on the front here. It's called your subscap. It's very important for stabilizing the front of your shoulder. Then on the back, you actually have 3 muscles. You have one that comes over the top. That's called your supraspinatus. Then you have one that comes back through here and lives all the way back on your shoulder blade called your infraspinatus. And then there's a tiny one that runs right along here called your teres minor. Now, another one that actually isn't a muscle, but it's actually a ligament, is called the posterior joint capsule. And it's basically like a ball of ligaments that surrounds the shoulder. And a lot of times what happens in shoulder injuries is that area gets damaged and it causes you to have to put more wear and tear in the muscles around the shoulder and through the rotator cuff. And a lot of times people get these symptoms that feel like impingement, but it's actually coming from a dysfunction. So let's explain that a little more in depth. So essentially what happens over time is you have your muscles and your ligaments, and all they really need to do is stretch and contract. And I talk about this all the time. Over time, what happens is they get overworked. We're sitting in bad postures. We might do too much in our workouts, go to yoga too much, do too much CrossFit, or really just sit on our ass all day long, and that causes a lot of problems. So what happens is the muscles are constantly stretched and contracted, and it happens in ligaments as well. So over time, it's like this glue pours inside there. When that glue gets inside there, it causes 2 problems. It makes your muscles weaker, and it makes them less flexible, which is never good. Everyone knows you don't want to have weak muscles and you don't want to be less flexible. So what happens is this scar tissue builds up in all these rotator cuff muscles. And when it happens, it actually puts more pressure on the joint and the tendon in there as well. So what Anna's probably feeling is actually some damage to what's called the labrum. So in the labrum where your shoulder comes together, so you got your arm bone here, and then you got your shoulder bone up here, in through there is where it comes together, and there's a cushion in between. That cushion is called the labrum, and all it really wants to do is just slightly cushion that. What happens over time when you don't have as much function in those muscles, they have to work harder, and then they start to jam into each other. And over time, that labrum starts to fray, and you get this thing called like a slap tear. Basically, it's a fancy word to say your labrum fell down to a different area. And that's what's happening a lot of times where people get like that deep clicking or that popping in their shoulder. It's actually inflaming that labrum. And a lot of times it'll give that feeling of like impingement, but it's not really impingement. And that's what happened with Anna. She went to reach for something and it got sharp really quick. That sharp pain is actually the labrum getting overloaded. Now, as we talked about, you have to have a tissue-specific diagnosis. So what these orthopedic surgeons do, they go, oh, you got pain in there, it's impingement, let's inject it. It doesn't do anything. It actually makes things worse, and it actually speeds up that degeneration in that cartilage. What you really need to do is get an assessment and figure out what's going on with that shoulder and that rotator cuff muscle. And a lot of times there's scar tissue built up in there. And if you want to get access to some of the best practitioners in the world, they're trained in my method called the PEAK method, and all the information on how to find them is in our profiles. But that's what's happening for your shoulder, Anna, is that scar tissue is built up over time and it's putting more pressure. So when you go to reach for something, it's causing a bigger problem. And all that cortisone really does is it just doesn't allow you to notice the pain as much, but that can actually be a big problem and cause bigger problems down the road. So thank you so much for that question. If you have any other questions you want to send to us, please feel free to send them our way. Send them over to our intern and he'll filter them out. We love doing these, and if this helped you or you know someone else that it can help, give us a comment, give us a like, give us a share, and share the word with other people out there so you can help us along our journey to make chronic injuries obsolete and keep people off pain pills. That's all we got for today. See you on the next one. Bye.